Hi there, folks. Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show. Tony, coming to you from New Zealand. Now, with me today, I have usually a pretty much monthly guest on the A Minute to Midnight Show, Leo Hohmann. And Leo, you're in Georgia, sort of in the centre in a way, or close to where all of the action has been going on with hurricanes and so on. So, welcome back. And, you know, the whole thing is real concerning and really interesting watching what's going on. So I'll throw it to you, Leo, but welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me on again, Tony. I really appreciate you have a great audience and always an honor to be here. So, yeah, the hurricanes. Wow. Notice I said hurricanes.
Yeah.
Because there's another big one brewing in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're saying that this one is going to be much, much worse for Florida than Hurricane Helene was. It's going to hit right in the thick of the biggest population centers in the state of Florida. Basically, the whole state, with the exception of maybe the Panhandle, the western Panhandle, and the very southern tip of Florida is going to be affected by this. And so we're talking about millions of Floridians as opposed to the Hurricane Helene, which really did a number on a very small part of Florida.
Yeah.
This one is going to be more widespread, and it's actually going to affect both coasts, both the Gulf Coast and the other side of the state, the Atlantic coast. Both are going to see storm surges. Both are going to see high winds in excess of 140 miles per hour, it looks like, possibly gusting to 150 or 60. I mean, if this comes in like they're saying as a strong Category 4 hurricane, or even possibly a Category 5, we're talking about a potential for massive damage to property and loss of life if people are not evacuated. Now, the issue of evacuation is interesting. Mike Adams put out a story today saying that FEMA or some other government agency, I think it was FEMA, Homeland Security for sure, which is the overarching agency that controls FEMA, is contracting with private security companies to prevent people from returning to their evacuated homes after the hurricane. And so that is suspicious right there, because we've seen we've got a long enough track record now from our federal government. When you go back to Maui, you look at East Palestine, Ohio, Maui, Hawaii, Western North Carolina, it almost seems like a concerted effort to drive Americans off of their land.
Absolutely.
For large periods of time, if not permanently. And then there's this issue of, in North Carolina, lithium deposits under the ground, which are very much in demand by world governments, not just the United States government right now, as the world switches over to more of a digital and electronic mode, you know, with digital tracking devices, these things right here, using lithium batteries, electric cars, electric scooters. All of this electrification requires a lot of lithium, and not a lot of countries have access to that mineral. So it is in high demand, and the government wants control of it. And isn't it interesting that that really is the overarching goal of Agenda 21 and Agenda 30, is to gain control of the world's resources, to inventory and control, as some have said, all things living and non-living, especially those with great value like rare earth minerals and stuff like that. So it's right in line with this one world system that's coming into being. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a allergic reaction going on here. But It remains to be seen how the American people react to this. I do think a lot of them are waking up. What do you think about that, Tony?
Well, for a start, you mentioned the lithium deposits. I see, who's the biggest shareholder in them there? It's BlackRock, and they've
Yes,
increased their shareholding recently. So and then you've got the quartz mines as well in North Carolina. So quartz, like really high quality quartz crystals, are mined in parts of North Carolina. So that's needed for like all your crystals for computer chips and all that. So what's happening there? And you were saying drive the people off the land, and I think that's exactly it. This is what they want. You've got to combine depopulation agenda with
yes,
repopulating people to where they want them. So you have,
correct.
and the whole smart cities idea for the future and all that. So if they get these people off the land so that they can't return, well, and then the government takes over and these big greedy corporations.
And think of how many people in rural Western North Carolina are going to never return to their homes and be driven into cities, liberal cities like Asheville or perhaps Charlotte, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia. They're going to be going to cities like that to get just to be able to stay on their feet and get an apartment or someplace that they can afford to live. And that's exactly what the government wants: is fewer people living independently on the countryside and into smart cities, smart suburbs, and places that can be easily converted into smart cities, which I think that is in progress as we speak. Um, we're not like China, where we build smart cities from the ground up. Here in the United States and most countries, it will be we will see actual existing cities converted to smart city technology, and that is happening right before our very eyes with the license plate readers and the stoplight cameras and the audio microphones being hooked to light posts. All of this is part of what Klaus Schwab calls the fourth industrial revolution. Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum and others have touted this. It's all for the new means of control, and the wars are part of it as well. I believe that World War III is really heating up. We see it kind of on the back pages with all the news about hurricanes and natural disasters. Not many people are paying attention to what's going on with Russia, China, Israel, and Iran. Um, Ukraine just hit a major oil terminal last night in Russian Crimea. Uh, and it was a direct hit that's going to take that oil terminal out of commission, probably going to raise the price of per barrel of oil because it was such a huge a number of barrels that go through that particular terminal. And they're using Western weapons, the Ukrainians, to do this. And that doesn't mean they're winning the war. They're still losing territory inside Ukraine to the Russians. But they're able to use these long range attack on missiles and British Storm Shadow missiles to hit Russian infrastructure. Inside Russia and on Crimea. So it's very concerning. And I think it's all leading to Western troops will eventually be going into war against Russia after the Ukrainians have all been used up. Uh, you know, uh, eh, we will start to see Poland, the Estonians, perhaps the other Baltic countries, the French, the British, and the United States moving troops into there. I predict within the next 6 months to a year, we will see troops on the ground. They're already there to some degree, but not officially and not in large numbers. That is going to change because the Ukrainians can only go so long as the proxies of NATO fighting the Russians. This is a country of 38 million people, Ukraine, fighting a country of 150 million people, Russia. So it's impossible for them to win that war. The entire purpose is simply to soften them up, soften the Russians up for an eventual invasion from the West and NATO.
Yeah, well, yes, the whole war situation is pretty dire. You got the Middle East as well. But before we go back to there, though, I want to return to the whole thing with the floods and the hurricanes and so on. And you're talking about getting people off the land. See, another way they're doing it is by increasing people's insurance, household and flood
Yes.
insurance. Now, someone was
Yes.
telling me their property in Georgia was they had flood insurance. It was $700 a year, and then when they went to renew it, it had jumped from $700 to $7,500 a year for the same property, and they still don't insure the whole house. And so, they said, well, sooner or later, people aren't going to even afford their insurance. So that's another way to get people, off the land.
Yes.
And
100%. Yeah.
So it's
absolutely
it's all
good. Great point. And the United States FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, is offering a whole $750 to the flood victims in Western North Carolina. And as I understand it, that's not even a grant. That is a loan.
wow.
Yes, when they do receive compensation from their insurance company, they're bound to then pay back the $750 to the federal government. And if they don't, well, now the federal government has what? A claim on their land and can seize that land as collateral for being in default on that $750 loan. So this is going to play out over a period of months and even years. And when the dust settles, I think you're going to be seeing the bottom line that a lot fewer Americans will be sitting on acreage in Western North Carolina. A big chunk of it will be sitting in the hands of the government and in big private corporations like BlackRock and its affiliates.
Well, if you all go all the way back to the 1770s and the Illuminati and Adam Weishaupt and the formation of it, one of their original goals in their 7-part plan was the abolition of private property. And then you see Karl Marx did the same thing with the Communist Manifesto, which was just basically a repeat of what Weishaupt originally had said. And so you can see that playing out. This is exactly what's happening. And
Klaus Schwab said, "You will own nothing and be happy."
Yeah.
And Klaus Schwab, as I understand it, has a picture of Lenin in his office.
Yeah. So I mean, these people have generations of Illuminists, I guess, with the same plan, only now they've got the power and the ability to be able to do it. And one of those things that, is like the smoking gun that you can't talk about because you're a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearer, if you suggest the whole climate change, global warming thing is a hoax. But what isn't a hoax and what is real is the fact that they've had, and obviously improving upon, their weather modification techniques and the ability to use them for weather warfare. That's been going on for decades, only now they've got way more tools to do it.
I put out an article a couple days ago how climate change or climate control, is being mass marketed as climate change. Yes, the climate is changing, but why? I mean, I never thought it was really due to human activity. The climate is always changing, but in a more short-term perspective, it's changing because it's being controlled by these weather modification technologies, cloud seeding and the like. I'm not an expert on it. In fact, I was always kind of skeptical about it. But recently, I think the evidence is really accumulating to not just that they have this technology, but as you say, it has been perfected, and they're much more efficient in using it. And I happened to uncover a old video interview. Charlie Rose of CBS and Catherine I don't remember her last name, but she was the one who moderated the recent vice presidential debate. Those two mainstream media journalists interviewed a scientist from City College of New York, and this was 9 years ago, and in which this scientist admitted that they have this technology and that it is even able to manipulate, quote, hurricanes. I kid you not. It's said right there on mainstream media 9 years ago, CBS News, Charlie Rose. It's interesting, Tony, how if we speak about these things, we're called conspiracy theorists, but they can talk about them on mainstream media, and that's okay.
Let's drop that clip in here so people can see what we're talking about.
Yes, I think your audience will be amazed.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion, though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far, it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops? And if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine.
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting, Professor Michio Kaku. Thank you so much.
So, yeah, that's interesting. There you go. And there's a ton of others. Like I say, if people do a search, there are white papers and there are patents talking about weather modification and using them for like military reasons. So I'll just show you something here, and I'll put on the screen a picture here. You know, this is a official US government document as well. So that's weather warfare.
And it was also used in the Vietnam War. The U.S. government used this weather modification technology and cloud seeding to create weather conditions that were advantageous to their troops. So, yes, it's been around for decades.
And they've got it so much more usable and powerful now, with billions and billions of watts of power being able to be projected into the atmosphere. I mean, HAARP in Alaska, that's like massively powerful, but that's not the only one of those around the world. So yeah, they can use these technologies to to basically affect the weather. And as an aside, you got to wonder how much electricity those things are drawing when we're supposedly short on power.
Yes. Yes.
But they must to generate billions of watts of power. They've got to be using an awful lot of power, don't they? So yeah, I'm not an expert on it either, as you say, but I can, I've been following this stuff for long enough to realize this is not natural, what's going on. I mean, obviously Florida and all those places, they've been subject to hurricanes for a long time. And it's not like they're necessarily creating something new, like creating these hurricanes, but they seem to now have the ability to steer them and direct them. And change the courses of them.
And to amplify them. This Hurricane Milton went from a Category 2 to a Category 5 in a matter of hours yesterday. You just don't see that in the natural, and so I've never seen it.
The other thing about it, Leo, is they seem to know days in advance that this is going to happen, so they tell you ahead, this looks like it's going to likely, become a Category 5 hurricane before it happens. And it's like, okay. Are they predicting the weather, or are they controlling it,
Exactly, yeah. And so, the other thing is the finances. That's been a big controversy. FEMA, when the head of the Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, comes out and says that FEMA is broke, it's run out of money for the rest of the hurricane season, while at the same time he's given away hundreds of millions to sanctuary cities to welcome illegal aliens and provide shelter for illegal aliens. Something is wrong with that picture. And if you point that out, you're called a spreader of disinformation. Yeah. Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas did that on Sunday morning NBC news show. And I think it was Kristen Welker, the anchor with NBC, called him out right there and said, no, that's disinformation. And he said, no, it isn't. And he provided the facts. And there's been numerous other people come out with a long list. What's that one? The one congresswoman from Tampa, Florida, Anna Paula Luna, or whatever her name is. The one I'm talking about? She provided a list on her Twitter feed of and it was straight from FEMA press releases, okay, of all of the money, tens of millions of dollars given to sanctuary cities to house illegals and provide other goodies for illegal aliens. And so this is the new MO. Anybody who comes out with the truth, they now hit them with the label misinformation, disinformation. And then they have the fact checkers on their side as well. If you Google this stuff, all that will come up, if you Google FEMA running out of money for hurricane season, you'll see a long list, Snopes, USA Today, PolitiFact, all debunking what is actually the truth, okay? And so it's gotten to the point now, Tony, where if the mainstream media is going out of their way to fact check something and debunk it, that's truth.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree. Well, this is it. It's they want to control the weather. They also want to control the narrative around it all. And, so they have everyone sitting there like zombies, yes, master.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That's exactly what they're trying to do. And the other side of what you're talking about, the money, is they haven't got all the money to help these people in North Carolina and all that, but they can sure send $8 billion to Ukraine.
100%. Yeah. I mean, they just sent another $8 billion. I don't know how many it's well over 100 billion now sent to Ukraine.
And they've just sent 137 million or something to Lebanon as well. So that money could have been pretty useful in America, helping out flood victims.
100%, and numerous other countries are all have their hand in the USA pot, pulling out tens of millions, sometimes billions, for their war efforts or whatever. this country is being run by the military-industrial complex. That has never been more obvious. Because if you're an American in need due to a natural disaster that you had no way of even preparing for. If you're in North Carolina, somebody said preparing for a hurricane in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, is like preparing for a blizzard on a beach in Miami. You're just not prepared to even prepare for it. You don't really know how to prepare for it because it's not a normal thing. Uh, and so when you're hit by something like that, you are left often with nothing physically, but even just the mental and emotional anguish that it causes. But you're confused. You don't know where to go. You don't have a cell phone to communicate with anyone. And all the government had to do was bring in the National Guard, hand out some of these Obama phones, right, that they give to illegal aliens, so people could be in touch with their relatives, those who have relatives that could help them. That would be all the government needed to do, basically, is get them some communication so they can call someone. Hey, I'll meet you somehow, somewhere. You pick me up to a place where we have power, and get your life at least starting to be recreated in a different way, because this totally destroyed the status quo of these people's lives. But where was the government? Nowhere to be found. The National Guard didn't show up for days later. We've even got reports of military helicopters hindering the distribution of supplies, food, water, and supplies to these people. I saw a video yesterday where a helicopter was hovering over this staging area. Did you see that?
No,
And
I heard about it, though.
several people were injured. Much of the supplies were destroyed. It was either through incompetence or nefarious intentions. I'm not sure which, but this helicopter pilot destroyed a whole staging area, basically, and injured a couple people. So strange things like this have been going on. We've heard about FEMA trucks being parked like 300 miles from where the supplies are needed, and not going in to help the people. But thank God there's been a huge response from everyday Americans, not with no affiliation to the government, with some going in on their own, some going in with various Christian-based organizations, and a lot of people are finally getting help.
The thing is, too, those people were being hindered by the government agencies as well. But of course, if you put that online, the fact checkers come out and will tell you that's all fake and false and all that as well. But there's been a lot of reports of people saying that's what's been happening.
Right. And I'm not saying all of it is intentional. I think there is a lot of incompetence involved. But it's happening. Yes. The hurricane response to help these people has been more hindered than helped by the government.
It's interesting too, because a lot of people were saying, to expect October surprises and not know where they're coming from. Well, here we go. And this is, still early October, and you got the second hurricane on the way. I mean, are there going to be more?
And I feel for both the people who've evacuated and those who have not evacuated. I have some relatives down there in the Tampa-St. Pete area. They said they evacuated in 2015. It was a nightmare. What happens is there's gridlock on I-75 trying to go north out of Florida. The gas stations all run out of fuel. You can't get food or gas. In many cases, you're stuck in gridlock traffic. So getting out is a nightmare. But if you stay, you're risking possible death. And if not death, you're sitting there. This time, I think they could be without power, Tony, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe longer, because what's happened, and this is another untold part of the story. One of the reasons it's taken so long, a week and a half, going on 2 weeks, to get these people power, not just in Western North Carolina, by the way, but parts of Georgia still don't have power from Hurricane Helene either. Others are just getting it yesterday and today. One of the reasons it's taking so long is because they need thousands of poles, electric utility poles, and transformers. These are the two end lines.
Yeah.
But what happened was the U.S. government, I'm told, requisitioned many of the transformers from American utility companies and sent them to Ukraine to rebuild that country's power infrastructure. And so now there's a shortage of these transformers here in the United States. And if you throw another major hurricane into the equation with Milton heading for Florida, I think it's supposed to make landfall Wednesday night into Thursday morning. My goodness, we could really be talking about shortages then of these poles, lines, and transformers that are needed to rebuild the electric power infrastructure.
And you mentioned people with the gridlock traffic and getting out. I was talking to someone from Tennessee the other day, and he was saying that the state highways in Tennessee, some of them are decimated as well, so you can't even use them from the...
Yeah, well, I-40, I drove past there and saw it firsthand a couple days ago. I-40, which is the one that runs east to west out of North Carolina and into Tennessee, that's still closed and will be closed, they say, for months, if not a year.
That's what he was saying, and I think there was a second one, I forget, which there was two.
Oh, I'm sure there are many secondary highways as well that will remain closed for months, if not a year or more. But I-40 is like an interstate highway. It is the main way that people get out of North Carolina into Tennessee and vice versa. And that to have that closed will have major impact.
And your news coverage has kind of relegated a lot of the stuff down the, somewhere down. You've got to go through a whole lot of non-event stories, like about some, star or something in their love life or some stupid thing like that.
Taylor Swift's latest, turn of the screw with her football player boyfriend. Yeah.
Yeah, and the real important stories like that, you have to scroll down to even find them.
I think that's a deliberate attempt to keep Americans in the dark about what's going on in their own country. If it's not in their own community or at least in their own state, they're relatively unaware of it. I mean, it's shocking how people are unaware of the depths of this tragedy. And they're talking hundreds of people are still missing in North Carolina from Hurricane Helene. I predict the death toll will probably it's definitely going to surpass Hurricane Katrina from 2005 in Louisiana and could double it. I'm serious. I mean, I think there were 1,100 people who died in Hurricane Katrina. I would not be surprised if it's double that or more from Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. And there was some people killed in Georgia and Florida as well from that hurricane.
Yeah, and it's going to remain to be seen what happens in the next couple of days. But
the bulk of the fatalities will be in North Carolina. Bodies are still being discovered. The stench in some of these areas of rotting corpses, I'm told, is just overwhelming. But finding them buried in the mud, it's a difficult task.
Well, I read this morning that some people are having to bury them in their own backyards because there's nowhere else,
Oh, in one of my stories, I have a video of a couple who, the Kramers, they have a homesteading channel on YouTube. And a few days ago, they gave a firsthand account of the gentleman of the household, Mr. Kramer. I don't remember his first name offhand. He went to go help search for bodies, and he barely got off his own property and discovered one that had washed up right next to his own property. Very sad. This is in rural North Carolina. Actually, he's in Newport area, which is Tennessee, right over the border with, right there near the border with North Carolina.
Right. So now it's going to, like you said, it's going to remain to be seen what happens in Florida in the next couple of days. But this could be the type of scene that's going to replay over, the next few weeks with hurricane season. Yeah, with someone behind a steering wheel directing hurricanes. That's pretty much what it seems to be.
It
these
sure
days.
seems that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. So basically, all right, we've covered a lot of this. There's not a pretty picture, but from a practical point of view, what can we do? What do you suggest, people in the hurricane areas perhaps even do?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's well past time we start to view these things through a different set of glasses, a different set of lenses, and stop looking at it through the lens of, oh, the government will respond, oh, the government will take care of us. No. Hurricane Helene showed us that the government, whether intentionally or through incompetence, I think it's a combination of the two, is going to be nowhere to be found when you are at your most vulnerable stage, when you are most in need, you and your family. I've seen just some incredibly heart-wrenching videos out of North Carolina by people who, they don't get this destitute, this vulnerable, this emotional, from being out of power for a couple of days. This is when your house is destroyed. You have no means of communication. You have no vehicle. If you do have still a vehicle, you have no gas because the gas stations are all closed. You have little to no food unless somebody is come and given you some, because the grocery stores are all either closed, or if they're open, they require cash only. And too many Americans are still operating under the impression that their credit card and their debit card will always be there for them. I'm sorry, people. Start waking up. Start looking at the situation through the lens of a prepper and a survivor. Have cash on hand. Okay, get some out of the bank, at least $500 to $1,000 if you can, because most people sadly don't have more than $20 or $50 they could scrape together in their entire house.
Yeah,
and so even though they may have it in the bank, it's no good to them in a situation like this when the electronic systems go down. And it could be other things. You may say, I don't live in a flood-prone area. I don't live in a hurricane-prone area. Well, in your area, it could be an earthquake. It could be a cyber attack. It could be anything that takes your system down. And you now have no cell phone, or it doesn't work once it's lost its charge. That's what happened. Some of the cell phone networks were still up, but people couldn't charge their phones because they had no electricity. So imagine a cyber attack where all the systems were knocked out, regardless of whether you had electricity or not. So we have to be prepared for this. Get cash, get water, lots of water. Water is still relatively cheap. Go get some and store it in your house, in your shed, wherever, your garage. And of course, then food. You can go 3 weeks without food. You can only go 3 days without water.
Yeah.
Get a way to filter water, as well. A Berkey or some other sort of filtration system. And think about a solar power bank. If you can afford one, they're not cheap. I think it's like at least $1,000 for a 2,000 watt solar power bank. Gas generators are wonderful as long as you have gas, right? I wouldn't invest in an expensive expensive gas generator unless I also had, about 20 gallons or more of gas that I could store on my property. So it's things like this that people need to think about.
In many ways, you're better off with diesel too, because it lasts longer. Like either that, or you got to keep cycling through your gas. And there's even small things like you mentioned, cell phones and lack of charge. People could even do things like buy a little fold-out solar panel that just for charging their phones. If you
that's what I'm saying. You could get a power bank, a solar power bank with a little fold-out solar panel. You keep it charged up, okay, and it'll go for 12 hours or more without depending on solar, if you keep it charged up
Yeah.
and then a storm hits. But then if, it lasts longer than 12 hours or however long yours last, then you roll out your solar panels
Yeah.
and you restore it that way. And at least you can, depending how powerful the power bank is, you can, you can at least keep your laptops and your devices, your cell phones charged up. If you have a one that's like 200 watts, I mean 2,000 watts, excuse me, which are the ones that run you around $1,000, you can keep a freezer going, for about 18 hours or so until it needs to be recharged. So these are all things to think about, but even a less expensive solar power bank will be able to keep your phones charged up for hours.
And there's things like lighting to consider too. So people might want to do well to make sure you've got plenty of candles.
Yes.
And kerosene
Candles
lamps
are readily available and cheap.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to stock up on now while you can.
Absolutely. And kerosene kerosene keeps well. You can do kerosene.
And
lamps.
Also propane. If you've got a propane gas grill, get you an extra canister of propane. Now you've got two. And that will last you quite a while. And you can cook on your grill outside.
Yeah, so there's a ton of things. Obviously, we could go for hours talking about how to prep. I guess the main point is if people are doing this and whether you've been prepping or not, it's time to probably reevaluate whether you've done any or not, or can you improve what you have done. Obviously, in some cases, your preps might get swept away anyway, but that's probably going to be a minority of people. Most people will probably have something standing where their preps will still be there if they've done them. So I highly recommend that people do what they can to be prepared for natural disasters and economic collapses and whatever else. And spiritually, we need to be prepared as well, don't we? So let's maybe, realize that obviously we've got to have our hearts right.
And pray for these people who have had their lives upended. In North Carolina, they're still going through it. They will be for some for many more weeks, some for months. There are some towns that are so destroyed that they say you can't even rebuild them because there's nothing left to rebuild.
Yeah.
So think about that, count your blessings, and pray for these people. And if you can give to the recovery effort, do so. But I would recommend not sending like to the American Red Cross or FEMA. Do not donate to those two. There's groups like the Cajun Navy, Samaritan's Purse is doing some, I don't agree with everything they do, but I do think they're doing some good work in this case. Groups like that are worth donating to if you can.
Excellent. Well, those are great points. So where can people find you online, basically in your articles and so on?
LeoHohmann.com. And also my Substack account is leohohmann.substack.com. I don't charge for subscriptions. I've got over 12,000 subscribers on my Substack. 90% of them are just free subscribers. If people want to do a paid subscription, that helps me out. That keeps me going. But I don't feel led by the Lord that I should make everyone pay in order to get the content that I'm putting out. So I make it available for free, and those who can afford to do a paid subscription, they are the ones keeping me going. I've got like 300 paid subscribers and 12,000 free ones.
Right. Yeah. So, folks, you do put out some really good articles, and I get them sent to me. So I see them, and I do recommend that people do subscribe. So, well worth it. So thank you again, Leo, for being on the show. It's been a real good one, I think, and people need to hear this one. I think they really do.
I think so too, Tony, and thank you for what you're doing to get the truth out. You've got one of the best Christian podcasts out there, and God bless you going forward.
Thanks, Leo, and we'll catch up again soon. Cheers.
Take care.
Folks, remember to subscribe to us at aminutemidnight.com as well, and we have Rumble, BitChute, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube channels. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share our video. A Minute to Midnight's run 100% by donations, and a big thank you to the folks that do donate to help us It's very, very much appreciated. And if you want to help keep this, keep us running and keep us afloat, you can donate at aminutemidnight.com. The music used, I've written, played and recorded as well. So God bless, and God willing, we'll be back with another episode in a few days' time.